I'd like to call to order calling the Monday, October 6th special Mill Creek SSA Advisory Board meeting to order. Time is now 6:30. Please take the roll.
Davidson, Fitzgerald, Kobeman, Neville,
Here.
Studeman, Herbalist,
Here.
Zobitz.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. At this time, I'd like to go to agenda item 2 for public comment. As a matter of protocol, individuals who wish to address the SSA advisory body will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Total public comments will be limited to 30 minutes. Speakers shall refrain from statements, remarks, or conduct that is otherwise disruptive to the proceedings of the advisory body or which causes a disturbance. Please be advised that while tonight's meeting has the technical support allowing for AV capabilities, this is only for this special budget meeting and will not be extended to future standard advisory board meetings. And do we have anybody here for public comment, Mr. Earl? Hang on.
How it works. That's okay. That's okay. We got. Just make sure that you got a fresh battery. Only gonna take a minute. Bill Earl, 39W222 Armstrong Lane. The only question I have is how much cash on hand does the SSA have as of September 30th? That's it.
Okay, I see nobody else in the audience with public comment. Is there anybody online for public comment? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll move to item number 3, and that's the budget review presentation. So members on the screens as well as in the packets, you will see a portion of the budget that I briefed to the committee of the whole for the 2022 budget. In there, it reviews our mission and services. I don't need to go through this line by line. I'm sure you all can read and process. Second slide is the org chart for the Mill Creek SSA. Fourth slide is the Mill Creek SSA 2019 to 2022 budget analysis, going through the various years and what's been occurring.
Does that slide show how much cash is on hand, or can
We can get to that in a later.
so that'll come up later, Bill, in the presentation.
Okay. Slide 5 is the budget analysis from 21 to 22. That's another slower breakdown. And then we're going to go into slide 6, our current situation. So what we have here is almost $680,000 was collected last year in property taxes in the amended budget. During our last mailing for brush pickup, 2,280 homes were mailed to. So that's what we're seeing as far as residences. This means on a per average basis, less than $300 per assessed or equalized residence services per residence a year when you do the math. And you'll see a note that the cost of one tree alone is $400, not to mention initial watering and stump removal. That kind of puts into perspective how the services are being spread throughout the SSA. So what we have here is the situation is the SSA was founded around 27 years ago. The levy was set by the PUD to be about 50% of what's allowable. The levy has never been increased since then. What occurred over the years, to what information I can find, is that when you have let's look at the analogy. If you have a new home, you're not going to need windows in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are a new heater or things like that. So a lot of funds weren't expended and they started to build a reserve. What occurred then as the cost of services went up and more services were added and things of those natures to balance the budget, the funds were pulled from the reserves, but the reserves were never replenished. So coming fast forward to 21, looking into 22, we're going to have to really, really talk hard tonight about reducing services and or increasing the levy in increments of some sort. Quite frankly, the SSA being 27 years old right now is looking at having to do large road projects that have been put off for years. As we talked about last meeting, the burn program, it's not, we don't have enough money for that. Plus we also have a parcel issue. There's indications as well that Blackberry will not continue resurfacing roads if we can't follow suit with the ADA upgrades. All these large, using those as an example, those are very large expenditures that quite frankly, the SSA just does not have the money for. If we were to look, depending on, I'm backing up, depending on the size of the increase of the levy that we could discuss tonight, it could take several years before we can do any of these large projects, depending on the chunk. Again, these projects are hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially when you start looking at the asphalt, repaving, and ADA. Some tough decisions. And we also have to look at it this way, that if we decide to increase the levy, I need to take this information next week to the admin committee, support that as well as get that adjusted for this year's. If we don't do that within this next week or two, we're looking at putting it off for another year, unfortunately, and continuing to have the tough conversations and struggles we've been discussing. Not only that, the levies increases are 1 year in arrears, so we wouldn't actually even see anything to 2023. So it's kind of, yes, I understand it's a compressed timeline, but we're at a situation where we need to make some tough decisions.
So we've had the ADA was a federal mandate, and that was not, it was an unfunded mandate. So they basically said, start replacing these ramps and curbs and so forth, and we're not providing you any money. And even though they're, you know, in the life of a curb, 25 years isn't that long, they would have had quite a bit of life ahead of them. So that's just one of the items. And then we have the aging out of some of the wiring for street lighting and entrance lighting that's going to have to be replaced. And you know, the prairie burns we've put off now. It's not a disaster. You don't have to burn prairies every year, but we certainly would like to do it every 2 or 3 years and get around to all of them. So yeah, we've been really, you know, pinching the pennies, and it's just gotten to a point now where, you know, we have to look at, again, the staff just can't provide the services everybody wants. Not even what they want, but what they need, some of the basics, without having to cut back on some of them with the funds that we have right now. So, you know, again, the levy hasn't been raised in a long, long time. You know, there are additional slides. I guess we're up to the option A, option B, and things like that. So we'll go through that. But, you know, we're just looking for some direction from the SSA board on which way to go. And I don't think it would be unreasonable for well, I'll give my 2 cents maybe later after the discussion, but we have to look at a solution here tonight.
Okay, and in front of you and on the screens, there's slide 7. If you'd like to peruse through these real quick to give yourselves a better foundation, you know, I don't need to read these line by line, bullet by bullet to you, but we'll take a few minutes for you to process this information, which I think will be very valuable in educating you on what we can consider in the future. So if you like to take a look at slide 7, we'll do that together. Excuse me.
Oh, okay, yeah. The things like, it's like right at the distance where I can't read.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the cash on hand and how it's been being depleted slowly to balance the budget?
Sure. Bill, are you referencing account number 10000? Okay, let me read the report as of today for 2021. The beginning balance is essentially 1.1 and change. Total debts is 600,000 or 640,000 and change. Total credits is 500,000 and change, and ending balance is 1.3. Now, what isn't realized there is the committal of a lot of projects that are still underway and not cashed out, and or it reflects projects that we weren't able to start because we didn't have enough funding. So those numbers are not a real world look at what reality is. Today,
That's all the second half taxes.
Yeah, that's 10/6/21. So the correct me if I'm wrong, but as Chris said, by the time we paid down a lot of debt, we don't have that much money on hand. I thought we were down to,
yeah, my last estimate was around 180 some
yeah,
thousand.
that's the number I had. So I believe we're down to about 180. And our finance director felt that 300,000 would be the standard that would be used in the finance industry based on our budget that we should have on hand. So, the scenario we always use is, what if a tornado goes through? And even if there's not that much damage to the homes and that, we may have a $50,000 lump sum expenditure in an emergency like that. Could be even a lot more. So, we've been slowly depleting the cash reserves to balance the budget. And so we're trying to get ahead of it so that we don't have to keep depleting that. We could get our reserves back up to where they should be. So I guess that's.
Yeah, correct, Drew. And then, even beyond getting our reserves back to a comfortable operating level of 300,000 per the finance director's recommendations, that still doesn't even address these large scale capital projects. Damn, darn it, did it again. These large scale capital projects we have looking at us in the near future.
So I guess based on those of you that have read through this, comments or questions or thoughts, to get the conversation going.
First of all, just to clarify then, the available cash, that which is not committed is $180,000.
Around there.
Okay. Yeah, roughly. All right.
So I don't know can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
This is Mark. I thought you said there was in writing less unexpected expenditures, 1.1 million. So
Are you
where does-
referencing, Mark, what I just read off?
yeah, so if we go down to 180,000, that's close to 900,000.
Okay, so what
And-
we're not looking at in these numbers is the amount of contracts we still need to fulfill in payments and other option things. So again, like I said, this report that Mr. Earl is referencing that we pulled this morning is a flash in time, but is not a true accurate of the future.
Okay, so where do we get that's a lot of money. I'd love to see what that $900,000 is. When can we get that?
Well, there's really not $900,000 when you go back to, and I sorry, I'm sure you're not able to see the slide. I'll take you back one slide. See that number up there marked at 679, almost 680? That's
Yeah.
essentially the yearly operating budget.
Uh-huh.
That's it.
So Mark, are you asking what those expenditures are that would take the 1.1 down to the 180?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think he's.
Yeah, that's where you're starting right there. That's the first number that comes off because that money is pretty much 100% accounted for within contracted services within the Mill Creek SSA.
So we really shouldn't be saying there's 1.1. It's cash on hand, but it's cash that is
Obligated.
committed.
Yeah,
committed
obligated,
to,
yeah.
Paying for things that we've,
So
already done or in the
we need to be
midst of doing.
careful too with the reference of cash on hand that some people, and depending on your accounting worlds, take cash on hand to be like a reserve or a contingency. It's not the same thing.
So for tonight's meeting, let's say cash on hand is 180 and,
Okay.
Financial, standards are that we should have, ideally 300. We don't have to have 300, but, it should certainly be above 250, I would say, ideally. So, and again, if we keep trying to balance the budget out of that 180, we're going to be down below 100 real quick. So again, we'd like to, and as Chris said, it takes a little while for the taxes and the collection to catch up. So, we want to try and get ahead of this thing before the 180 is down to 0 or below. And the county board's not real excited about having to balance the budget out of other funds. I don't think they would do that.
Is the per household?
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
That little green button on the, right there, you should have a green light.
Okay. Is the per household number, does that include the apartments? Like how are the apartments buildings taxed?
I can't speak to the apartments that they have their own HOA.
Yeah, the individual renters would not pay a property tax, but Shodine
Right,
would probably pay a
Does
property
Shodine pay a
tax.
property tax?
Yeah, as the owner, I can't tell you what it is, but any building in the county pays taxes other than churches and things like that.
I guess I'm just surprised that more isn't already collected. I'd love to see what they do pay in property taxes.
I could find out.
Okay.
The same with Greenfields, because I think that's the other non-single family home property.
Yeah, I'll check both those out with our assessor.
And the road work that we're talking about, I mean, Blackberry Township is still committed to doing road work, correct?
Yeah, the road work is Blackberry Township's responsibility, except in some areas in the
For the
downtown.
Geneva Township area.
What Rod was talking about is he's reluctant to put in new paving. When you do asphalt paving, it's a single sheet and they hate tearing it up. So what he doesn't want to do is pave a road and then have us come in the next spring and start tearing up, a couple feet into all the intersection corners. So I don't know if that's really going to hold him up, but he just mentioned that recently that, but that's really on him if he wants to slow things down. But early in the year, when we talked about the budget issues internally, the ADA stuff, it's mandated, but there's no real end date. So I just said, let's just slow walk it as we can afford it. And then Rod kind of threw that out there, but I don't know if that's really in his court if he wants to do that.
Is that everywhere or just in the downtown
It's
area?
throughout the entire
Throughout the
subdivision.
entire-
Bill, would you know like a percentage or Chris, what, like out of 100% of what we have to do, are we?
It definitely affects the loop around the area piece. So the PUD was really written as that area, the village market being the first focus or the first portion of that development. So the PUD was really written 27 years ago in favor of that area, whereas it doesn't even reference.
But do we know how far along are we on the ADA project? Do we know just?
Well,
rough?
we took a small stab at it last year from what we could afford and pull together out of multiple funds, a small area of the south side, around what I call the spoked wheel, spider web looking area. And we did what we could afford. And in fact, we had to go back and value engineer it to remove what was originally bid.
We might be at 25%.
So we're not even that far into it, really. Yeah, so about. a
Okay, so,
quarter.
but what is the commitment to do it? I mean, what does it cost to get in compliance with the ADA?
Well, that number would be a varying number. Again, let's look at the markets right now. Costs of services and materials are fluctuating, and it's a volatile market. I actually see paving being more expensive than concrete potentially in the future due to the use of petroleum products. So again, it's very hard to nail that number down.
Maybe a ballpark. I mean, you've got to make a budgetary someplace, because what I'm hearing tonight is we don't really have much of an option. We've got to go two routes with it. You got to wait a year and a half before you get a penny if you increase it, which means that you're struggling through that year and a half. So that means we have to make some cuts someplace. So that also means you have to know that. But without knowing what things cost, at least in rough budgetary terms, and, you know, be generous with it. I'd rather have it's a $200,000 expenditure and it comes in at 185, than it's a $200,000 expenditure and it comes in at 235.
I would guesstimate to resurface the area, the village.
We're talking about the ADA.
And I'm going to try to lay an analogy here when he's trying to think about forecasting. I would expect that the Area P Village Market area repaving is going to be somewhere around $500,000 easy.
Okay.
What did we spend? What was that, Lil? It was like I don't have the number stuck in my head. Yeah, 218, wasn't it?
$180,000.
Yeah, it was, another, again, it was around, over close to $200,000 for what little bit of ADA we were able to do.
So the reason there's not one big number, is the staff's been just picking away at what we can afford.
No, I understand that, but he also said it was about 20% or 25%. So we're probably looking at another $700,000 to $800,000. And given the volatility of the price of oil, we could probably budget that and say it's $1 million expenditure coming up.
Yeah, between
To do it
paving and-
completely.
Between paving and curb.
But that's not going to be done in a year anyhow.
Right.
So we've got to look at that in a longer range plan, as you do with the inflow of funds and the outflow of funds.
I wouldn't let the comment from Blackberry about we won't pave if you haven't done that. I don't know. I think he might
There
have just,
might be a stipulation in that law that says that he can't pave unless we,
okay, well, so
Unless
if
we
it's
have
if it's
that
mandated,
ADA.
we're stuck with it. So,
yeah.
so what we need to do is get together with Rod Feast and say, because their budget's, not great at all.
Right.
And they can never raise that levy. So he only can pave a certain amount a year. So really what we need to do is talk to him and say, what do you plan on paving over the next 3 years? And then we could calculate the intersections and the curb cuts that we have to deal with.
Right.
So it wouldn't be that hard to come up with a workable budget. Like I said, on the plus side, the Fed said you have to do this, but they didn't say you have to do it 2 years,
Right.
So I think if we could just stay ahead of BlackBerry, but again, we still need to have the funds to do anything.
Rod and I had the conversation last week that they're looking at what they're going to be able to do as far as resurfacing roads next year, and he's going to include Bill and I in those discussions. But again, like you said, Mr. Frost, we need to come up with a course of action tonight.
Mhm.
So why don't, as a suggestion, so we can plan on ADA work, we paved a certain lineal footage of road this year. We did an ADA project, and for those of you that weren't in the room, I remember the ADA mandate was if you're going to pave something, you better make it ADA compliant. So it kind of falls in suit with whatever they're going to pave. We have to make ADA compliant. If that is true, if the concrete work that we just did, say we did a mile of road and the concrete work costs $200,000, it's $200,000 a mile, right? Now that isn't perfect, but it's something, it's more than nothing. So maybe, with Google, we could just, if the ADA work was $180,000, $200,000, let's just Google what they paved if we don't know, or ask Ron, how many lineal foot or miles did they pave?
So our agreement right now, Mark, is that we're working and planning in conjunction that'll work within his budgetary constraints and ours. But again, we just don't have what we don't have.
Well, for tonight's discussion, really, we should just go on the assumption of what we've been doing, in the past. So, we've been doing ADA work every single year consistently. And, we know our budget is at 679 or whatever it was. So I guess tonight's discussion is that, yeah, that's one of the big expenses. But the reality is, we have lots of different expenses. So if the citizens and the board in Mill Creek, it comes down to having to live without certain things, or talk about raising the tax levy. And if you look at that sheet, there's a few different options. We don't have to raise it, my personal thought is.
That's slide 9.
Yeah, slide 9. Let's do that, because I think,
Does anybody need time to digest slide 8? We can take a few minutes for that. There's more information there that would be valuable to your decision-making process.
Well, I just wanted to see if you could speak to that last bullet on page 8. As far as, it seems like this just gets pushed back a lot farther with the discussions of when the land transfers are gonna take place. So are you able to characterize, like, if you have a sense of how much more land we might be taking on for the maintenance of?
Not really, and I'll tell you the reason why. We've got multiple organizations in here that could be affected as Shodine tries to move properties around between the water district,
Yeah, but what's the worst case scenario?
there's a lot of little parcels, but it's not like we're taking on 50 more acres or something.
No, I understand.
So,
I'm just trying to get a rough sense of things.
yeah.
I mean, I've already conceded in my mind that we have to increase the tax burden, right? And I'm not sure how the mechanics work with that with the SSA, but on the other side of that, we also need to show something where we do some cutbacks of something, at least temporarily, because we don't have the luxury of this thing being retroactive. So we have to wait once we put it in place. And I'll say here, and from my standpoint anyhow, if you're going to have a community and the SSA is to an extent responsible for helping to make that community look good, the better that community looks, the better everybody does in the community, because the property values go up. Whereas then just our taxes go up and everybody says, well, now I got to pay more taxes. But it's still much better if the community is doing well. If it falls into disrepair, it's not good.
Right.
Yeah, the county, we have a process. It's usually related to drainage issues, but we require SSAs on every new subdivision now for that very reason. But we're trying to clean up some stuff that goes back to the 60s and 70s and 80s where there was no SSA. And I'll tell you, when there isn't, the property values go down because stuff doesn't get done.
Right.
It's oftentimes rural subdivisions, and it's ditches and drainage and trees growing in ditches. But yeah, you definitely, Mill Creek has a great reputation and we want to maintain that. But even simple things like the Christmas decorations, you might go, well, that's an easy cut, but I guarantee you, we'd all hear about it
Yes.
real quick, so.
There are some cuts that they may sound like they're easy, but they don't fly very well with
Right, exactly.
the residents.
So people are expecting a certain level. I was just sitting here thinking, we're in the city of Geneva. I wonder, has Geneva's taxes gone up in the last 27 years? I would think so,
Mhm.
So
How long has it been since we've had an increase?
27 years.
27 years.
It's never been increased.
Ah,
There
okay.
was one year where there was a collection issue and they had to double up. And that caused a lot of phone calls, but it's
Right.
never been raised. So, we're trying to provide goods and services at the rate from 27 years ago.
Yes.
And I don't know anything you can buy right now for that, for those prices.
Has it ever fallen this short before?
It's just been inching down because we've been using the reserves to balance the budget.
I
And
see.
then we got hit, kind of a double whammy. We're pulling down the reserves, and then we got hit with the ADA and,
Mhm.
the wiring issues and some of those things.
Okay.
So it's sort of come to a head a little more rapidly than we would like. But, actually, we're trying to headed off more like 18 months from now, I guess I'd say, but we want to have something in place
Mhm.
so that we don't get to that point. Because I know there was a little discussion at the admin committee meeting and, you know, the board members were very adamant about, you know, let's get this straightened out because the county doesn't want to be balancing the budget
Right.
because the rest of the county gets no benefit from that.
Mhm.
So.
Wow, okay.
Okay, if there's no further questions on 8, we'll move to 9. So here's a couple incremental options along with current service cuts, which is another fun discussion, like was mentioned. So I looked at it this way, you know, going back to the recommendation of 4 to 5 years, which, or longer or permanent, you know, there's a lot of ways we can cut this apple, but I have the numbers there in front of you so you can see that we can do this little bites at a time or we can go higher, but I'm just wanting to provide you some sort of a framework to see where we can go as a starting point.
We're kind of approaching this at the county level, you know, with the tax levy too, because we've gone 9 years without raising it. And so there's a discussion within the board, you know, it's great to say we never raised taxes in 9 years, but
Mhm.
we're getting behind on a lot of things.
Yes.
And
It's affecting
you
other
can't go-
areas. Yeah.
and you can't go back to people now and say suddenly that we want to raise it a lot. So a lot of discussion on the big picture countywide is that maybe it would have been a lot more painless to raise it in small increments
Mhm.
regularly than, you know, kind of get the great feeling that taxes are never going to go up and suddenly you're in arrears by so much. So, you know, my personal feeling is, you know, I would suggest the small increments, but, you know, we may have to do it, you know, a few years in a row.
Right.
And I think that would be easier palatable for the public and they'd still see their services getting taken care of. And I guess it would probably be a little bit of cutting back on certain things or really keeping a tight budget, but knowing that, you know, we get that extra $100,000 is, you know, about 12% or whatever. I can't do the math, but increase in 1 year, that's not bad as far as our budget, but
I think
Does
as
this
long
have
as
to
the
be voted
public
on or anything?
aware of it. Sorry.
say again.
Go ahead.
Does this have to be voted on like other?
Well, I guess we would like to get ideally, we would get a consensus, unanimous consensus from the advisory board to the county board. But
You know, like the residents of Mill Creek don't vote on it?
no.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Well, you know, we have to stay, the only thing they would have to vote on is if you guys wanted to raise it a lot, you know, but I mean, within these
With the-
parameters, you know, we're allowed to raise it, you know, within certain parameters. It's just that we've never done it. So I guess, you know, the SSA is almost like the county times 3. It hasn't been done in 27 years instead of 9.
Why do you think it hasn't been done in 27 years?
It just, I don't know.
We've had
Well,
enough?
we didn't have some of those big projects.
Okay.
And the reserves were pretty substantial for a while. So the reserves, pulling down the reserves always balanced the budget year after year after year.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think incremental raises will allow us to be able to do more of the, you know, the required jobs that are
Well, it's
being
all,
requested?
for a few years, it's only gonna let us do what we've traditionally done. So, you know, it's not like we're gonna be swimming in cash and be able to do the leaf pickup or something like that. It's, you know, needs, wants and desires, and we're gonna be stuck on needs for a while.
Yeah, the only way to come out of needs is to take a bigger percentage of the levy. So, and hang on a second, let me find the right slide.
So sorry, but maybe I don't really understand.
So
this.
somewhere in the middle,
Sorry.
Big-
So in these bullet points, it says that the contribution will go up $348 per household or 43 per household per year, or like what, I guess I don't understand how much it will go up per household for each of these
So it's-
situations and then,
On average, $342, and it would go up about $49
Per year is what Barry was asking.
per year.
right?
Yeah, per
Yes.
year. That's the annual SSA
oh, I see. okay.
assessment,
So it's an increase of $43,
right?
but we would be paying then okay, I didn't read it that way.
So it's, I don't know. There's all kinds of ways you can say it, like that's a dinner out,
Yeah.
But it does, I really don't think that people are gonna
I mean,
do well if we suddenly say we're raising it by 30% or something.
Yeah, on slide 7, in the middle of option B, to answer your question,
Mhm.
that is the most, in the middle there, that is the most we can allowably raise the levy, and you can see the difference between these options. That would be the far extreme.
Yeah, so tax law, that's put there so that, a government body just can't go nuts raising
Right.
taxes. So we can only do it within, so we're staying well within these parameters. I think the mistake that's been made is it just hasn't been done. And I mean, geez, even if you did it once every 5 years, we'd be in good shape now.
Yeah.
But it's never
I
been done.
commend you for keeping it, not having to do this all these years.
Yeah, and again, that's the problem we have at the county is we for 9 years, we never raised the tax levy, but
Oh.
we got salaries that are behind the times, and
Mm-hmm.
so we're in a very similar situation.
Boy.
So I have a couple of comments and questions. The question is, can this be discussed on a yearly basis, or once we decide or vote, or the county board votes, is it like permanent? Or is it every year, can it get changed?
So I need to recommend the levy percent rate to the Director of Finance annually. And so, yes, we would then engage and have a yearly conversation with you.
Okay, so then the other thing for those that weren't in the room, let's say at my inception of being on the board, which is about plus or minus 10 years ago, things that changed or got added that weren't in existence up to the point of my introduction to the board were the sidewalks, which is the ADA, or the trees. Neither of those were part of the SSA prior to my participation. That was discovered and decided by legal after the fact, because somebody read the PUD or something. I don't remember the detail, but, and then the other unexpected expenditure or unanticipated, but again, these expenditures, somebody's got to pay for it. So they have to get done. It's not like anything's been getting done that's not necessary, but that bridge over the Mill Creek off of Dodson, I think it is. And if there's any other future failures, that's $100,000 or 80 to 100 grand, as I recall. So that's a lot of money. That was not part of when I first joined the SSA. No one was thinking that way, at least. Obviously, I hate to say it, but shit happens, but pardon my French, but all the same, those things were unexpected expenditures, yet nothing's been raised for 27 years. I think the community has hoped that just the increase in residents and the increase in taxes from that would cover the normal expenses, but certainly even the people that set up the PUD or whatever it was 27 years ago, the trees in the ADA were not thought of. And I'm glad somebody figured it out because it's got to get done anyways. But I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
Mark, this is Chris. Yeah, in reference to your things happen, like Mr. Frost said, if we have a catastrophic weather event out there, we're not sitting in a good position. So I did it again. We're not sitting in a good position right now.
I would just like to get to the point, and it may take us 3 years, but I would like to get to the point where when something needs to be done, staff can go out and get 3 prices and get it done. And right now, we're just, they're white knuckled all the time trying to figure out how to pay for everything. And so, I would just like to, even if we don't add any additional services, I would like to get to the point where at least we're not just sweating every single, penny, trying to get the stuff done. And, we're gonna have to start cutting the services or something, but I think that would be tough. But I think the way to go, and just so Chris, on like your first option there, that's to gain 100,000 in additional tax levy. That's your sample number one there.
Yep, and bullet number 2 is 200,000. And, again, you said, like Barry pointed out, $43.84 per household annual levy increase. And then the next one is 87.71 cents. And again, that's taking this in very small, much more digestible increments than going to the
And-
full
and it-
levy.
Those are just samples. So in theory, we could even split the difference between those two.
Yeah,
Could be anything.
I wouldn't recommend going anything less than 100,000. It's just,
Yeah,
that's
no, I
just,
was thinking, I would love to do the 200, but I think an $88 increase to their SSA bill would be noticeable, but the other one doesn't seem as much. So, maybe something in between, but we can do anything. Those were just two round figure, 100,000 and 200,000. But again, I think the board has to realize that this might come up every year for 3 years or so, rather than just do a big lump sum. So I guess I'd like to hear thoughts from the board on what you think would be palatable.
Well, for me to close out what I was gonna finish commenting on, I agree that the levy should be raised under the condition that somebody commit to the time to come up with budget numbers in detail, at least in general detail, for what this stuff is for, instead of, so if a neighbor comes up to me and says, hey, why did my property taxes go up $41 or $56 or whatever it is? It's not, I mean, obviously we know, well, there's just not enough money and it's gone up in 27 years. That's not gonna fly for 5 years. We're gonna have to say, well, it costs $36 per lineal foot of road. It costs this much per tree. We got, everybody knows when you do a budget, you have to have detail behind it. And so I'm not going to be able to endorse this for any more than this round because we only have 2 weeks, I guess, without that information. And that gentleman on my left and to your right, Drew, brought it up in a different way, but we really need to know in general, it's not rocket science, but it needs to be done. That's my feeling.
Yeah, well, we can certainly, that comment from the road commissioner about how the paving is linked to the ADA work just came up this week, or in the last week and a half or whatever. So we can have staff talk to Rod and see if he could give us a forecast of what roads he would pave over, say, the next 3 years. And then we could do a pretty accurate budget of what ADA work would have to be done over those 3 years. The trees come and go, but we can certainly look at averages there. So those seem to be the two biggest variables. And at the paving to some extent, but we don't have that much paving that the SSA's, it's only the town center. So we could probably even come up with that fairly well. But, I would suggest that you think about the either the option 1 or I wouldn't recommend the option 2, but either option 1 or option 1.5. I guess I'll call it.
It also has to do with inflation, Mark. I mean, nothing's increased over 27 years and we're still providing a service. So
Yeah, we're providing 2021 services from a 1994 budget.
Yeah, and the one thing we didn't talk about too is the electrical wiring. That's the third thing that we, it's one of those things that, it sits there for 20 plus years and then starts giving you fits. And that's where we're at right now. And, depending on how much of it we do and so forth, that's, another $30,000 to $60,000. So we just got several big items here that just are coming around. Like Chris said, the perfect analogy is you build a house, well, you don't have to worry about the roof or the windows maybe for 30 years. And all of a sudden it starts, coming time to pay Peter. So we really need to do something. Apologize for the shortness, but it's just the way things fall into place at the county to get this done. And we just kind of came up with this over the last month. But to get this done, we do have to, I guess we would like a recommendation today.
I mean, to me, the infrastructure is just going to get worse. I mean, we need to get ahead of it. I mean, it's going to be more expensive if we wait longer. I mean, personally, I'd rather bite the bullet and
Yes.
do it and take it on now. I mean, we've been kind of neglecting it for years. I mean, it's been piecemeal. So, I mean, considering these two options, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure $87 is.
Well, you may have as
might
much
not
of a
notice.
fight to sell $44 as you do to sell $88.
Right.
I mean,
I think it was mentioned,
for that fight twice, it might be easier to
Yeah.
just do it once.
I completely agree. And
Then it at least gives you a jump start after, and if you have to do them after that and they're smaller, it's more palatable probably that, but if you don't get a jump on it, inflation's gonna hit us. It's not, I mean, there's,
and the infrastructure is going to
discussions, but
crumble.
it's there.
still.
Yeah.
So,
Is there any way that somebody can anticipate with a smaller increase what the bottom line will be next year with some of these expenditures and know whether we're going to fall back to 180,000 after next year again? I mean, isn't it, there should be a way that somebody could calculate, okay, based on, this increase, what this will give us next year at this time, so that we don't fall into this situation
Correct me
again.
if I'm wrong, but we would probably have to dip into the 180 for at least one more year.
Okay,
But then hopefully after that, if we're careful, we could start rebuilding that.
okay.
And we don't have to get up, well, first of all, we don't have to get to 300,000. That was ideal. But if we could get it, 2 to 250, I think
Sure.
that'd be pretty comfortable.
Sure.
And that might take several years to get to that point. But, it's kind of like a savings account, even though we want to do these things, we're going to have to put some money back in those reserves every
Mhm.
year and build it back up.
So it sounds like some of us are leaning towards the 1.5 option or the second option, correct?
I guess there's
That
some
makes sense to
merit to the,
Yeah.
if you're gonna get somebody, I always say at the county that, the headline the next day never reads county froze the tax levy for 9 years. It says county raised taxes. So you end up taking the flack anyways, but I suppose if it's under 100, maybe it's more palatable. As Barry said, it'd be the 80, whatever that is, 88.
well, instead of, to her comment, instead of the 43 or the 87, why don't we look at like 60?
66.
Yeah, I mean, we can recalculate that and figure out what percentage that is, and that be the middle of the road recommendation. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it sounded like, yeah,
These two are leaning towards
I was
the,
leaning towards the
88.
second. I mean, I think there's other things too. I mean, sidewalks, bike paths, electrical fences. I mean, the list is endless.
that,
Yeah.
the 88 would certainly speed things up.
Yeah,
One of
I
the
mean, I want to
things
get
that
to the
helps
fun
us-
stuff. Like
things
get
that
the
helps with
infrastructure under
speeding it up.
control.
At least in my opinion, is that people start to see more things being done, because if you do the $45 or $44, whatever it is, you're still saying, we're just gonna be, that's just to maintain what we're doing. So they're saying, yeah, our taxes went up, but nothing improved, nothing changed. The lights are still out. This is happening, that's happening. At least if you have a little bit to work with, you can get some things done, and you need to have some things done that people can visibly see and say, this is something that they're doing it.
You're right there, because if we saw $100,000 gain, half of that would be fixing, more than half of that. We would spend more than half of that fixing the electrical. If we saw no further problems in the electrical system.
Yeah, that's just the streetlights that we've had assessed now.
Right, right.
So, yeah, valid point.
We don't have a lot of them though.
Well, we should all be
About
bragging,
10.
that we haven't, nobody's raised it. Our predecessors didn't raise it. We didn't raise it for
Right.
27 years, but it's not a fun thing, but it's like when your car breaks down, you gotta fix it. So I guess, do you want to just have a straw poll? I mean, what are you thinking?
Mary, what do you think? Been kind of quiet over there.
So I guess my question is this like a flat? So it'd be like 87, 71 every single household, or it's based on how much the house is worth or what you, so it fluctuates a little bit.
Yeah, it'll fluctuate amongst the EVA.
I don't know. I don't know what, I mean, you're right. Like people are gonna say my taxes went up $50, but nothing has happened. But then they're gonna say my taxes went up $88. And if you're not in an era where something's happening, then nothing happens. So, but you're right. They're not, they don't want their Christmas decorations taken away either. And we've had the same group of people in here every single meeting saying my lights are out. So, and there's the same group of people complaining about the ADA sidewalks regardless. So 27 years, I would hate to tell you guys how old I was in 1994, but that's a long time to not raise taxes. And we're going to be jerks if we do, and we're jerks if we don't. So let's,
I think it's
we're
necessary.
going to hear about $87, I think, from some people, and some people that's not a big deal too. So that's my opinion.
I liken it a little bit to the water reclamation system, because if you remember back in 2009 or 2010, just coming out of a recession, we had a significant increase in our water and water bills. And a lot of that was that there was nothing ever put aside for infrastructure. Same deal. I mean, that's, you start out, it looks good, so everything's fine. But I mean, they seem to be able to get things done at this point. They did one big increase. And then it's gone up incrementally after that a little bit, but not significantly.
I guess I'm coming around to the higher of the two, because that would probably lessen the need to do it again, or if you do it again, you could maybe do a smaller amount the next
Right,
time around.
right.
But this would give a shot in the arm, that's badly needed.
The
And I think
shock
people
out.
are noticing that things haven't been happening.
Yeah,
And I think that with this
sure.
being so local, I mean, knowing this money is going like literally to your sidewalk outside of your house, I think helps.
Mhm.
Drew, are you guys talking about, when you're talking about doing a county tax increase, then will that be on top of this then, or?
Well, it's totally separate
be
from this, but it's just, I'm not saying we're even gonna do it.
Okay,
mean,
I
'cause
just didn't
we
know if
have
this
other
is gonna hit
options,
people
like we can do
twice?
we can do a 1/4 cent sales tax.
Okay.
and Things like that, but they all have implications. We can do a gas tax for transportation items. But yeah, it's just the same thing as we were under austerity for 9 years.
Mhm.
And because when I got on the board in 08, the recession was at full swing. And we were talking before the meeting, we used to have the landfill, which was like having a money tree,
Mhm.
and the riverboat money, and that's all. The landfill's done, and the riverboat's dwindled to about a quarter, or a tenth of what it used to be. So yeah, we've been struggling every single year, but we just balanced our budget, so we do it every year. But we're wondering where the next money tree is going to be. So I guess the thing to do would be to take a vote.
Yeah.
of the-
Okay, so
I guess there'd be somebody should make a motion for one of the options, and then a second, and then a vote.
yes, sir, that'd be the proper Robert's rules.
I can certainly make a motion for the higher amount that Barry referred to, the 1.2987 and change average per household.
I'll second it.
Okay, so moved by Mark Neville, second by Barry. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nobody opposed? Motion carries.
Thank Thank you.
Thanks very
Was
much.
easy.
That was a good discussion. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a good, and I think I think it's the right way to go.
Well, we can move to item 5. I have no need, or does anybody have a need to go to executive session?
Okay.
No? Okay.
So next time we'll have a little more time, hopefully. Next time around.
Yeah, okay, then we'll move to adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second, please.
Second.
Favor, say aye.
Aye.